So on this talk, it's a great pleasure to welcome Paul Levy. Hi, Paul.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you.
And Paul wrote a book that I bought recently, and I was fascinated, so I called him up to have him part of this program. So his book is called Quantum Revelation. So we'll get to talk about that in a minute. But maybe, Paul, in the beginning, we can talk about you a bit. Can you tell us a bit about your story and how it led to this book? Because I know you wrote many and you're writing more, but kind of give us a bit of a snapshot. Who's Paul Levy?
For sure. So how I came to do what I do, it's a little unique, or it's a lot unique actually. So I'm 63 right now, but when I was in my early to mid 20s, I had a spiritual awakening that almost killed me. And it was because it was just catalyzed by incredible suffering. And I'm not going to go into the story, but it wound up, I'm an only child, and my father wound up being this really bad guy and had incredible issues and unresolved abuse stuff that he just acted out on me. And being very sensitive, it created just enormous pain and suffering for me. And how I dealt with it was I went inwards and I began to assume the position of the witness to my own mind to see what was happening, because that was the only thing that seemed to make any difference as far as helping with the suffering. And then after a couple of years of doing that, with a teacher and studying different spiritual traditions, I had this huge awakening. I got hit by a bolt of lightning, not from the sky, but inside of my brain, just lightning ignited. And I didn't know it then, but I was having a Kundalini awakening. And I was so ecstatic at what I was realizing. And what I was realizing was that we're having a shared dream, a collectively shared dream. And I was 24 at the time. So I was so enthusiastic that I really freaked people out, because from their point of view, I had this radical personality change overnight. And I got thrown in a mental hospital. And during that next almost 2 years, a number of times, maybe 3, 4, 5 other times, I got thrown in mental hospitals because I was a free agent. I was out in the world having this life-transforming spiritual awakening, and it wasn't integrated yet. It couldn't have been, because it was so overwhelming. And I'm really one of the fortunate ones. So the last hospitalization was 82. They had me diagnosed as being, oh, you have this manic depression. You'll have it for the rest of your life. You're going to need to be on medication the rest of your life. And I knew they had no idea what they were talking about. It was so obvious to me from my own inner landscape that I was having an awakening. So I very quickly got out. I extricated myself from the psychiatric community. And I was having the double suffering of the abuse from my father and the abuse from psychiatry, and which was so horrendous. And it just destroyed my family. Both my parents died, having bought into the psychiatric point of view that I was just in denial of this mental illness. So, but, I was fortunate to be able to continue my awakening and meet more of my teachers. And it took me a long time, maybe 12 years or longer, 13 years of working on myself, going to therapy, connecting with my dreams, making art, studying Jung, studying Tibetan Buddhism, studying shamanism, studying alchemy, just all the stuff I was doing. And then after a dozen or so years, I had integrated enough that I realized, wow, I have something to offer based on my own ordeal. And that was in the early to mid 90s. And that's when I began to teach. And, so that's basically how I discovered my work. So all of my work has come out of this spiritual awakening, this profound suffering that I'm still in the middle of. I'm not in any way saying I'm this enlightened person. No, I'm in trauma like all of us. I point out that our species is in trauma. And, but I've been fortunate to connect with my own creative spirit, or the creative spirit. It's not mine. And that's what's helped me to discover my work.
It's just before I called you, I read on Facebook a quote from Jordan Peterson, a Canadian author. You must know him.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, me too. And he said, the quote was, it said, enlightenment requires to walk through hell. That's why there's so few enlightened people. You need to shed all the untrue stuff. And it's very, very painful. Thank you for sharing all that. Thank you. Because I love Jung as well. And I discovered on my own path that suffering leads to awakening. You need to go through all that stuff to awaken. Can we talk a bit about your book? 15 years ago, I discovered quantum physics. Not that I know any of the formulas, but I discovered the application, and through my own journey, I kind of linked spirituality and quantum physics and psychology, and now I have my own view of the world, which relates to all that. So when I saw your book, I don't even know how I found it, but I was I think because we're Facebook friends, I saw it pass, and I said, I got to get that. And I also like the word revelation. So can we talk about what's your book about? And maybe you should talk about some of that wisdom.
Yeah. So I'm not a physicist at all, but I'm a really curious person. And the founding fathers of quantum physics, which happened, in the early part of the 20th century, were basically saying that this is the greatest discovery ever in all of history in science. So that got my attention. And even then there's Albert Einstein himself, who said, the discoveries of, and I'm paraphrasing, the discoveries of quantum physics are so uncommonly important that they should be everyone's concern. And so I've been going down the rabbit hole of quantum physics for decades. And in essence, it mapped onto what I was experiencing when I was spiritually awakening, in that quantum physics has empirically proven, that just to really put it in simple terms, the act of observing influences the universe observed. That there's not two separate things, a subject observing an object, but the act of observation is creative. Okay, that's the rabbit hole I go through. I go down, and that opens up everything, because basically what that's pointing at, quantum physics is proving that this universe is a mass shared collective dream, that all of us are collectively dreaming up moment by moment into materialization, which is to say that we have this unbelievable creative power that interfaces with the sacred, that it's not just a human power, but we actually have this power beyond our wildest imagination to call forth our experience of ourselves and our experience of the world. But almost all of us are unconscious of it. And because of that, we're implementing this incredible divine creative power to dream up our experience of ourselves and of the world unconsciously, in a way that's destroying ourselves. Yep. And that's evidenced by what's playing out in the greater body politic of the world. So what I'm pointing out is that quantum physics, it's like revealing to us, it's this living revelation that is literally reflecting back to us our own creative power that we are unconscious of, and it's revealing the dreamlike nature of our experience in a way that's a game changer. So I even point out that, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, I do practice to Tibetan Buddhism in a particular lineage, and there's this idea that the lineage gets propagated and continually refreshed by these treasures that are hidden. You could think of it hidden in the fabric of the universe. I talk about this in my book. And then right at the exact moment when that treasure is needed, somebody who's destined to discover that particular treasure will discover it, and it will bring the community of practitioners back into balance. Like if they get one-sided, say, they're overly materialistic, it's very much like a dream. When you have a dream is a compensation for a one-sidedness in the dreamer. So if we get one-sided and off balance, all of a sudden there'll be a symbol of the dream. And quantum physics, by the way, is a symbolic procedure, and symbols are the language of dreams. All of a sudden there will be a symbol in the dream that will precipitate out of the dream field that will help people get back connected to their wholeness. I'm pointing out, so this in Tibetan Buddhism, it's actually called terma, the hidden treasure tradition. It's a real thing. It's not a fairy tale. Scholars have been studying it for years. I'm pointing out that quantum physics is a modern day analog to a terma. It's a hidden treasure that we as a species have dreamed up both into the world and into our minds to help us to remember who we are, to help us to wake up to the dreamlike nature, to reflect back to us our incredible creative potency. And when you see that, it's like a psychedelic, basically, but its benefits in true quantum style are in potential, in the sense that quantum physics is showing us that this universe is a participatory cosmos, and likewise, the benefits of the revelation that is quantum physics will only be actualized if we participate with the revelation, which is actually to recognize what's being revealed and to become quantum activists and to step in to our incredible creative nature. And this is evolutionary. This is what quantum physics is showing us. We should be on the rooftops screaming. This is, I point out in my book, this is the good news. This is called the Philosopher's Stone, the Holy Grail, the pearl of great, the treasure of great price. There are all these metaphors for describing what quantum physics is this revelation of. And I'm just an ordinary person who, just based on my own experience, is realizing, oh my God, what quantum physics is mapping and describing is exactly what I was having the realization of when I was spiritually awakening.
Wow. So how do we use this wisdom to maybe come back on track? Because our humanity right now is going through upheavals. You know, there's a lot of, and I keep saying that we co-created all that. You know, it's not luck that we are there. We've all contributed to it in some kind of way. How do we use that for, you know, because you went through quite a process. You said mental institutions. By the way, I have a close friend who I'm going to show this video after, was also in a mental institution 12 years ago for 10 days because he had a severe awakening. Nobody would understand what was going on to him. How do we use it to transform our society?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, in the sense that one way of understanding what quantum physics is showing us, it's showing us the dream like reality. What that means, I mean, what is a dream? Say you're in a dream, and say, if right now in this dream I'm talking to you, and you're a face on my computer screen, and we're having this discussion, and it's being recorded, and I'm sitting in my house, all that. Well, if I'm having a dream of that, and if I'm not awake to the nature of my circumstance, I'm going to think it's actually separate from me and other and objective. Well, quantum physics, in proving that the act of observing actually influences the universe that we observe, another way of saying that is proving that there is nothing objective out there separate from us. There is no object. There are no things. There is not an objective universe. When you realize that, well, then what happened to the subject? Because the subject needs an object to be in relationship with. Once you realize there's no object, there's no objective world, it brings into question who we are. That connects with the dreaming, because when going back to, if I'm in this situation of being interviewed by you right now on my computer, and if I'm not awake to the nature of my situation, I'm going to think things and all that. But if all of a sudden I have lucidity, I'm going to realize, oh my God, in talking to you, you're just a reflection of that part of me, that I'm actually not out of my mind. I'm inside my mind. I'm inside my psyche. My psyche is all around me. That's to have lucidity. That's to recognize the dreamlike nature. When you realize that, there are incredible benefits, because you realize, oh my God, the sense of separate self, of that you out there separate from me, that's the illusion. That actually, all of a sudden now I see through that illusion, and I realize we're actually interconnected and interdependent. And the realization of the energetic expression of that realization is compassion. So, so when I see that, you see, what we suffer from a collective mental illness, our species. I wrote a book about that. Watiko is the Native American term. It's like this virus of the mind. And one way of really understanding Watiko, it's a psycho-spiritual disease of the soul, and quantum physics is the medicine for Watiko. Watiko is a psycho-spiritual disease of the soul that operates through our projective tendencies in such a way that we entrance ourselves by how we're always projecting. An example, that you have an ink blot and you project onto the ink blot a butterfly. Well, the very moment you project, it's not like 2 seconds later, that very instantaneous moment you project onto the ink blot will shapeshift and reflect back to you that particular object, i.e. a butterfly in this example. Then you become entranced thinking that's actually objectively existing separate from you, so you react to it. You become conditioned, but you're just becoming conditioned by your own projection, by your own mind. The source of that whole process lies inside your psyche. The point is, we've hypnotized ourselves. That's the essence of the collective madness that we're suffering from, and is inspiring us to destroy our planet and our species. here along comes quantum physics, this hidden treasure, which is showing us, hey, there's nothing objective. You're actually participating in the very universe that you're experiencing. So all of a sudden, that sense of, I called it like, the Native Americans call it Watiko, that whole illness that's based on, it operates through the blind spots. It's a form of blindness in which we become entranced by our projections, gets dissolved. And you recognize, oh my God, I'm actually interconnected and interdependent, not just with you, but with everyone, with the whole universe. And that's what I mean, that quantum physics is literally the medicine for the madness that is afflicting our species.
But okay, I welcome that. So, I keep saying, you live in the U.S., you have a president that some people don't really like or the question. I don't want to talk politics, but Donald Trump, he doesn't leave any stones unturned. And I keep telling my friends Canadian, we're all co-created him. We're all part of, Donald Trump is just a reflection of all of us, in a way. So practically, how do we use it, you and I, and whoever starts to believe in what you talk about?
Yeah.
Transform our society. How do we?
Well, I mean, think about it. I wrote a book. You're talking about Donald Trump. I wrote a book, The Madness of George W. Bush, a reflection of our collective psychosis. That was my first book, and what the book is about, and that kept me sane. I was so freaked out when Bush was president. Little did I realize what would happen,
10 years later. Yeah.
The whole point of the book, the thesis of the book was, we have collectively dreamed up George W. Bush, or you could substitute Donald Trump, as to embody our own madness, our own ignorance. And if we then, I want to go back to the Watiko idea, to the collective psychosis, which is what Watiko is. If we then think that Donald Trump is separate from us, and he has Watiko, he has this, dark energy, and if we think that he has it and we don't, well, Watiko feeds off of polarization. Then we've fallen under the thrall of the very illness that we're fighting against. The idea being, if we see George W. Bush or Donald Trump as a dream character that we've dreamed up, that's reflecting the mad part of ourselves, then we have lucidity. Then we've woken up in the dream to whatever degree we have at that moment. And then we're actually not just reacting to our own reflection and projection, but we're actually, by having this lucidity, we're able to, to actually see what's happening sort of in a meta way, in a deeper way. And then it's a question, and, it's a real question. All of this sounds great from the metaphysical, psychological point of view, but what to do in actual fact? And the point is that one way of understanding, so quantum physics is the medicine for the Watiko collective psychosis. That's the Native American term, which is really connoting the spirit of evil. And so encoded, you see, Watiko is a quantum phenomenon. When I say quantum, what I mean, think about light. Is it a wave or a particle? Well, it's both, depending on how it's observed. In the same way, this Watiko idea, which is a saving idea, by the way, I talk about that in my book, encoded within it are both the deepest evil and its own medicine and the highest light. It's actually helping us to wake up. Everything depends that something is being revealed to us, not only through quantum physics, but what's playing out in the world. If we recognize that what's happening in our greater body politic is a revelation of something that exists within ourselves, that's when we actually connect with who we actually are, with our true nature. Once we connect with who we actually are, whether you call it the Buddha nature, the Christ nature, or perfect nature, there are all these metaphors and symbols for it. Doesn't make a difference which name you use. Once you connect with that, then you become an agent that's actually able to intervene in the universe in a way that can actually make a difference, that can actually be of help. If you don't recognize that, you're just coming from your own fear, coming from your own unconsciousness, you're just reacting out of your own conditioning, and you're putting fuel on the fire, making things worse.
So all the people on Facebook that I see every day criticizing Donald Trump, they're just adding fuel to the fire. They're not helping solve anything.
Well, it depends. It depends because on the one hand, you know, there's a relative level, which, yeah, he's doing stuff that is warranting being criticized.
Mhm.
But, you know, it's like this. If somebody's a political activist and they have good intentions, you know, to be of help, yeah, but if they're still coming from anger and hatred
Yeah,
and
yeah,
separation,
yeah,
they're putting fuel on the fire.
yeah,
I talk about we have to become spiritually informed political activists.
yeah, yeah,
And what I mean is you have to, you know, have the lucidity and the spiritual understanding that, yeah, there is no Donald Trump separate from us. That's to be under illusion. Yeah, on the one hand, we need to honor the relative level and try to like
Mhm.
stop whatever he's doing that's destroying the, you know, the biosphere.
Mhm.
And, but we can't be coming from a place of
And
reactivity,
anger. Yeah.
hatred, or anger, because energetically that's the fueling of the fire. We have to realize, no, he's not separate from us. You see, if we actually have that recognition of that he's reflecting, he's a dream character reflecting that part of us, and we actually metabolize and integrate that part of ourselves, then we more deeply connect with who we actually are. Like I was saying, when we connect with that, that interfaces with with the creative spirit. Then we can actually, instead of reacting to the negative energy, which is just feeding it because we're reacting unconsciously, we can actually step into creating the world we want to live in. And we see the evil, we're not avoiding it, we're not dissociating from it. I know so many well-intentioned, new age, good spiritual people who just don't want to think or look on evil without realizing by avoiding it, by turning a blind eye, you're actually feeding evil. That's Watiko. Watiko is a blindness. It's turning away from the darkness, whether it's outside or inside. That's in essence what Watiko is. You have to see it, but you can't become fascinated by it. You then have to recognize the evil, see how it plays out in the world or in your own reactions or in your own mind. And then as a sovereign being, you can choose, where do I place my attention? I want to place my attention in creating the world I want to live in. How do I do that? That's how we can be of benefit.
So you, Paul, practically as a spiritual person, understanding and knowing everything you know, what are your practices to affect the field in a positive way? What do you
Yeah.
do?
So I do my whole people who know me, my whole life is structured on a given day. Every day in the morning, I spend the whole morning and I write, creatively write. I write my books. Like I said, I have a new book coming out. You
Mhm.
know, in the next year. So on the one hand, my whole day is structured around being creative. Like even when I finish this interview, I'm going to go out because I have some time this afternoon, and I'm going to do my afternoon session of writing. Then I study a lot. Then I do Tibetan Buddhist practice, where I'll do every day hours of practice, meditation, visualization, prayers, mantra, whatever it is. Just connect with myself. Then I work with people. I have all these people who I just saw somebody. I 3, 4 groups a week. So my whole life is devoted to trying to be of benefit, but not just to other people, but to myself. And the key thing is that if I didn't have a way of expressing myself creatively, the greatest poison in the human psyche is unexpressed creativity. Okay. So if we're all creative beings by nature, that's what quantum physics is showing us. The act of observation is creative. That's the equation. Think about that. We're not just passively observing this universe that's separate from us, that's objective. No, we are literally co-creating the universe with itself. Our nature is creative. So what's healing me every day, that's why I structure my whole day around it, my whole life around it, is expressing myself creatively. It doesn't make a difference what the medium is. I personally am doing, you know, right now with writing. It could be dancing or drawing or the way you wash dishes. Doesn't make a difference. But the idea is to make yourself an instrument for something beyond yourself to express itself and to create yourself through it, where you step out of this limited, solidified identity and you realize, well, I'm creating myself anew every moment.
Hmm. So how do we, assuming that the current world is has challenges, you know, we're destroying our planet, there's, you know, a lot of people dying of hunger. How do we help other people awaken maybe to the dream without having to go what you went through? Or maybe this is a necessary path.
You don't have to go through what I went through. I mean, that was like I said, it almost killed me. It did drive me crazy. And it destroyed my family. I haven't had a family for 20 years,
Okay.
so you don't have to do that. One way of understanding is like we're a species, like I mentioned, in trauma. And think about what trauma is. Trauma, it's a particular form of mental illness that's actually the most sane response to an insane situation. So in trauma, there's the compulsion to repeat. So the way we're in trauma, something happened historically, we become traumatized. The way we try to heal from our trauma is the very thing that creates the trauma we're trying to heal from in an infinitely self-perpetuating feedback loop. That's a way of describing trauma. Now, encoded trauma is a quantum phenomena. Encoded in trauma is its own solution. What I mean is that in the very acting out of our trauma, we're actually trying to remember something. We're actually trying to discharge something. My favorite definition of trauma is unexperienced experience. So we are literally trying to experience something consciously that at the moment of trauma, we were so overwhelmed that we couldn't integrate it. We couldn't experience it because it was just overwhelming and we didn't have a self that could actually have that experience. So what I'm pointing out, for example, to make it in these real terms, we are destroying the biosphere. We are currently enacting and participating in our own collective suicide. There's no question about that. We're destroying the biosphere, the life support system of the planet. Question arises, how come we're doing that? And it's exactly what I'm talking about with trauma. Encoded in that dynamic of us destroying ourselves, where we are literally, that's the way we're teaching ourselves how not to destroy ourselves, which we clearly haven't learned, or we wouldn't be destroying ourselves. The point being that encoded in the pathology is the medicine. Just like if you remember what I was saying about Watiko, encoded in, because Watiko is the source of all the evil that humanity is playing out, encoded in the evil is the actual light, is the actual gift. If Watiko didn't exist, we would have to create it. It's actually helping us. But if we don't recognize what it's revealing to us, it will destroy us. In the same way, if we don't recognize what we're acting out on both individually through our addictions or habitual patterns or trauma, or like in our relationships, or collectively in the greater body politic of the world, if we don't recognize what we're acting out and what's actually being revealed through our acting out, we are fated to destroy ourselves. That's our circumstance in a nutshell.
So humanity is going through what a human goes through to awaken. You often have to go through really dark, and it's like when we're young, most of us burnt our hands on the oven and then we never did it again. What you're saying is that the challenge is, if we don't learn from what we co-created, then we will kill ourselves, and we will eventually kill the planet and kill ourselves. But I find that, like Trump, he is a representation of all of us, but he's also, in his own way, by just being who he is, awakening so many people to how things really are. And we're always like that. He's just like a caricature of what the United States is going through and the world, I guess. So the question
makes me think of like because when I was through my awakening, I was, a young kid. I was in my early to mid 20s. I had no idea about any of this stuff. And then at a certain point, I had realized, well, I've gotten sort of enlisted into a shamanic initiatory process. And think about it, and we're all shamans in training, really. We're all like sort of, have gotten enlisted into the shamanic process. And just think about what that means. The archetype of the shaman, first off, no one would ever choose in their right mind in a million years to become a shaman. You'd have to be a complete idiot to do that, because you have no idea of the unbelievable suffering that's entailed. Now the shaman, they always get called. It's, by the deeper spirits, you could say. And then the key thing is, when you're called by the spirits to your shamanic sort of this vocation, if you don't assent to it, that's when you can get really crazy and sick and even die. But once you start to assent and cooperate with the calling, that's when all of a sudden you get supported. But always it involves making a descent into the underworld of the unconscious, into the darkness, which is the place of like their madness and demons and death and all that stuff. And it's it's dangerous. And I'm talking from my own experience. The danger is to get stuck in that. And we see people who are just like in that feedback loop of they're just continually re-traumatizing themselves and in this like black hole of endless pain. And that's tragic. But the idea is at a certain point, the shaman is able to ascend and come back to the community, and then they bear gifts, you know, based on their ordeal that can help the community. And the thing with a shaman, one of the most important things is that a shaman will literally, because they're so empathic and their boundaries are permeable between the conscious and the unconscious, they will literally take on the sickness of the person, say they're working with a client, of that client, and they themselves will fall sick. Okay, but what makes an accomplished shaman a shaman is they're able to metabolize that sickness and bring themselves back to health. And by doing that in a non-local way, they actually help the client also to heal. And the point being is that so many of us are like feeling stress or anxiety or depression or despair. We're suffering, all of that. And yeah, that's our own process, and we need to deal with the stuff in our lives that's reflecting and expressing. And being would-be shamans, we also might be taking on the illness that's in the macrocosm, that's in the greater field of the universe. And being shamanic, we ourselves have taken on that illness that pervades the whole universe. And if we can bring ourselves back to our center, to our wholeness, then that's a real contribution we're making to the world.
So being a sensitive person, I feel sometimes that I'm feeling the suffering of the world. I'm helping heal the world. So do you feel on your journey, do you feel that humanity is awakening, or are we stable? Do we have a chance?
Yeah. So okay, and I love that question because I want to bring in quantum physics. Again, I talk about this in my book. One of the things about quantum physics, so think about it, you have a quantum entity, and before it's observed, it exists in a state of potentiality of any and every state it could possibly ever manifest in. The moment we observe it, all of those potentialities, they vaporize except one actualizes. And that's the universe we experience, right? Remember, the act of observation is creative. But what that means is that even if one of those potentialities is highly, ridiculously unlikely, it could still manifest. It could be the universe that we step into in this very moment. Now, think about that. Right now, it looks like things look dark. Things don't look good. And a lot of people are despairing and depressed and anxious and stressed out. And, it's like as a species, we're driving over the nearest cliff and committing collective suicide, like I've been saying. But yet, there is a possibility that enough of us are actually awakening to our true nature, or you could say it, owning our shadow, or having the recognition of the dreamlike nature, however you want to paraphrase it. And any one of us doing that in this moment might be like a beautiful image. When you take grains of sugar and dissolve them in a glass of water, they dissolve and dissolve, and that water reaches a saturation point, and you add one more grain of sugar and a crystal will manifest. Mm-hmm. That moment, could be this very moment. If somebody hearing this actually awakens to the dreamlike nature, mm-hmm. that could be that grain of sugar that crystallizes and precipitates a global awakening in all of humanity. Quantum physics says that's a real possibility. Even though it seems highly ridiculously unlikely, if we're thinking that's impossible, then we're part of the problem. Because then we're going to draw evidence to confirm our point of view, and then we advance ourselves by our own incredibly creative power of reality in a way that's killing us. What I'm saying is when enough people actually are awakening, and there are more and more of us who are awakening to whatever degree, and it's an ongoing process, we could potentially invoke that highly ridiculously world where we as a species awaken and avert the impending catastrophe that otherwise we're dreaming up at warp speed.
This is where, Paul, I find that the media in most cases aggravates the problem, because we only report bad news. And there's a lot of good stuff happening in the world, but it never goes on TV, obviously. So we portray these bad stuff, and it seems that it fuels people, and then they get angry. So this is why I was curious about, and I agree with you that one awakened person usually awakens a lot of people around, not just with their talking, with their energy and their positiveness.
Yeah, totally.
But and I read the biography of Da Vinci, and this followed the Dark Ages, and to me it was a rise of consciousness. It's obvious, we invented accounting, poetry, and I keep telling people we can do it again. We can do it again.
Right.
We got to believe it, and that's why I was curious about your practices. My intuition is I need to strengthen my own practices, to bring more of this love and this belief, and one person can affect the quantum field in a big way. I think if the
Yeah,
vibrational way is good. So, besides your books, and you have your own practice, your way of affecting the world is mostly through your teaching and your books.
yeah. So in other words, so on the one hand, there's interviews like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
I'll give lectures and stuff like that. I'll give workshops. Every week, I have 3 or 4 of groups of people
Okay.
in the local community, and some of the groups, the average tenure might be over 10 years of each person. Some groups
Okay.
are people over 20 years in the groups, and we all
Wow.
just really good friends. But that's something I do every week, 3 or 4 nights a week.
Okay.
Then I have a private practice. Then I write and get out my book. So I'm trying to do, and then I do
Yeah.
my practice, my prayers and
Yeah.
visualization.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just one ordinary person just trying to do, we're each given a role to play.
Yep.
It's not that other people need to be writers or this or that,
Mhm.
but what we do need to be, we need to become who we are, who we're
Yeah.
meant to be. We all have a mission, even if
Yeah.
that mission is being a good husband or wife or mother or daughter or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
And that's where the deepest healing comes, is any of us becoming who we actually are, instead of taking on the image of who other people think we are, or who we imagine we're supposed to be. No healing comes out of that. But when we actually step into just being who we are, that's in a sense the most incredible and healing thing we can do for the planet.
Yeah. I agree. I tell my students, if you're born to be a tree, don't try to be a tulip. Be a tree.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, one last question. We're all on a journey. I've never met an enlightened person, but I know they exist, and maybe you're one of them. I don't know, but I'm not.
Totally not. But I've met some of the
You have?
greatest. Yeah. My
Okay.
teacher. Yeah, I'm
And
really.
how do let me just curiosity? How do you know or feel that they are enlightened? How do you know when you meet them?
Yeah. Okay. That's such a good question. Just, for me, they embody, it's not just they're teaching about love and compassion.
Yeah.
They're embodying it. They're like imbued with it.
Yeah.
It's a palpable energy. You can just feel their open heart.
Yeah.
And, when I've known them for like 40 years, I'm really fortunate to have a number of people from Burma, Tibet, like that, who are considered some of the, greatest enlightened beings of the tradition, who are like family members for me. They come and stay with me. And so I don't just know them superficially. I know them really, really well. And I just see the way they are. And they're always the same. And they're always just completely at ease. And they're always just filled with love and compassion. And they're always thinking about other people. And they just inspire incredible love. To me, it renders the idea of enlightenment just meaningless, because who cares what enlightenment is? I don't need to know anything more than they're embodying to me all I need to know. And yeah, so I'm just really fortunate in that way, because I have these people as real inspirations, real models.
But you answered my question. It's all about embodiment. Someone yesterday was telling me about in India a guru and a sat guru. A guru knows a lot. A sat guru embodies all of it. He doesn't need to prove anything. So my last question was going to be for you on your journey, on your transformation journey, your growth journey. What are you working on now? Is there anything you're trying to overcome, or through your practices? Because we always have to shed some old beliefs.
Yeah. For me, what I notice, and I appreciate that, is I'm in a position now. My work is getting more and more out in the world, and I'm more and more out on the world stage. And concurrent with that, I feel these incredible dark forces constellated within my psyche that are trying, in a way, almost like to stop me. And instead of seeing that as an error, like, oh, how come this is happening? I mean, yeah, clearly I need to more purify and work on my stuff and dissolve my obscurations. I mean, all of that is absolutely true. And I have a perspective, well, of course that would be happening. that as I'm like any of us, as we bring in who we are, and as I bring in the light to, to the world, in my life, it's built in. Part of the equation is that there are going to be darker forces that seemingly try to stop you. And it makes me think of like when the Buddha was meditating under the Bodhi tree before he became enlightened, there were the Mara, the forces of the evil one, trying to stop him. And you could see that as, oh, that's like his obstacles. But but Mara, the evil one, was actually his secret ally. He helped Buddha to cultivate the muscle of realization. And that's how I see it, that of course there are going to be these darker forces that are trying to stop me, in whatever way they can. That's actually, part of the equation, and they're actually helping me to even more connect with who I know myself to be.
To make you stronger.
No, that's really like a very core, fundamental part of my day-to-day process.
Wow, this is so cool because in my own work, I'm starting to gain stature a bit as well, and recently there's been a few people contradicting me, kind of attacking me on social media, and someone said they're serving you to rise above that, because as you touch more people, 1 out of 20 will resist because you just triggered something. And I'm a very sensitive guy, and I used to take it personally, and now I'm working not to take it personally. So I can see what you say.
It's almost an expression that you're doing something good. Like my was saying, like, I mean, there were even people in my outside world who were manifesting, basically trying to destroy me, and I'm lucky enough to be like, oh, I must be doing something right. Actually up in that way. Yeah.
Paul, it's been a great time. Thank you. And I'm so captivated. I bought your book a month ago, never got time. I'm going to read it this weekend now. Okay, I'm really motivated.
Yeah. And I would love, feel free to be in touch with me to let me know.
I will.
I'm really curious.
And just for the people listening, the book is called Quantum Revelation. It's your latest, and I think people should read it. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.